Good day and welcome back to another World of Warcraft video. In this video I want to talk a little bit about obviously what to do when you hit level 70. It's actually something that's not really discussed so much. It's probably a lot of what you've been doing already, but there are certain things you're going to struggle with when you get to level 70. One of those is the power creep. So the first thing we're going to tackle is how exactly do you get your character at level 70 to being as strong as possible in the right ways, like as quickly as possible to become this ultimate machine. And one of those is getting all of your trinkets, amulets, and rings. When you look at things like unlocking your fingers, your trinkets, your amulet, a lot of them are very simple. Only the Time Raiders amulet, I would say, is one that's relatively difficult because it requires you to organize a group, and at level 70 you're also not as strong as you might have been. It's actually easier to do before level 70, but unlocking your rings and trinkets is the first priority. The next priority is starting to gather up threads. Now, threads at level 70 is pretty straightforward. Effectively, a greater spool of eternal thread, at least in the beginning, counts if it rolls for a secondary stat for around 1%. So for example, if I get a greater thread, which you'll see me do just now, and I collect it and I activate it and it rolls into crit, for example, my crit will generally go from 18 to 19%. It means you're going to need a lot more threads to get those substats to a very powerful level. Now this will naturally occur over time because you should still be running LFG, dungeons, scenarios, raids, doing the daily quests, etc. to try to extract as much power as possible and collect as much bronze as possible. Because remember also at this point you're now getting greater bronze caches, which are also 1,250 bronze. So it's not something you're not going to do, but it's not something also that's going to just happen overnight. You're probably going to need to run a couple rounds of dailies and do some normal raids if possible to do what you can. At the same time, we can look at things like gems. Getting your prismatic gems, because you'll have all your tinker and meta gems now, getting your prismatic gems up is probably the third most important method. But this one, to be honest with you, outside of buying them for bronze, which I don't suggest, you're naturally just going to do over time. And then the very last thing to talk about, and probably the one that's going to be the biggest headache for a lot of people, is upgrading your gear. Now how it works is quite simple. When you hit level 70, all gear, whether it's from a normal raid, heroic, raid finder, dungeon, heroic dungeon, LFR, whatever, all gear is 346. Now the rarities still can be different, but all gear rolls at a max of 346. Before you even upgrade any gear at level 70, run a couple dungeons, run a couple raids. These are the safest areas for you because you can be covered up by other characters because you're not going to be super strong at level 70. And get to the point where you have 346 drops in every slot. Then upgrade the pieces you have that have the stats that suit you the most, and get all of those to 346 at minimal cost, which you're going to see me doing here. Once your gear is at 346, it then becomes the bronze grind. So then becomes the question of how quickly or how much bronze do you actually want to spend on gear for this character. Now let me put it in perspective for you. A full round of LFR, LFG, etc. for a day, with all the daily quests, missions and everything, can net you well over 20k. And it doesn't take too long. We're talking maybe 2 hours depending on your class, server pop, etc. 2 to 3 hours. 20k will amount to upgrading like 6 items, 1 level, very early on. And this bronze is going to scale upwards quite dramatically. For example, certain items can take over hundreds of thousands to get to the very end. Because of this, the question of when and how to upgrade is a very difficult one to answer. For me, you have to decide if you're hunting cosmetics or hunting power. Power obviously helps in farming bronze in the future, but the big thing for me right now is I say you're going for cosmetics. I would say only really upgrade your gear beyond 3, 4, 6. Once you've picked up a couple cosmetics that you've wanted and things that you want, then you can look at maybe increasing your power dynamic substantially. So what kind of content are we looking at? Well, like I said earlier in the video, it's pretty much what you've been doing before. Because your main goal at this point is to garner bronze, everything you've been doing is pretty much the best way to do it. From dungeons to raids to world bosses, all of these are where you're going to find the most bronze, and so inherently doing them is going to be where you get the most reward. All of this content, the daily quests, everything you've been doing continues and remains the best method of getting bronze, and they've designed the game to be that way. But there are other things you can focus on at max level. Chances are you have not finished all of the campaigns. Finishing the campaigns gives you bronze. You get bronze from the quests, you also get bronze from completing the achievements. The achievements also relate to various meta achievements for Mists of Pandaria Remix. For example, getting some special cosmetics. During this process, you'll also probably collect gems, which is great, and you can continue to boost the power of your character with some minor threads. When you get yourself a little bit further on, you can look at clearing out some of the meta raid achievements. This is where things are going to get a bit more related to your gear, because if you want to form up a group or you want to do normal raids, especially at max level, you actually need to have a coordinated group and you need to have a guild. It's not that it's super hard, it's that especially if you're not OP at level 70, you can actually you can't go and just straight up solo raid once you hit level 70. You need a guild group. So finding a guild, getting a group of people or a community to help you kind of get your character through some of those challenges is going to be important. Otherwise, you're going to have to grind and upgrade your items so that you can get to the point where you're powerful enough to possibly solo. But I can tell you now, that is a far bigger grind than most casual players are probably looking for when it comes to Pandaria Remix. So keep that in mind. And finally, obviously, just kind of talking about level 70 and the experience. Level 60 to 70 is a nightmare a little bit. If you are using alts to level, you fortunately get past that. If you're looking to just make bronze, I highly suggest you look into the method of twink leveling. Right now, it's a great way to get up to 50k bronze, pretty much within a 3 to 4 hour span with leveling a twink. If you are someone who wants to stay on a main, accept that you're in for the